Hey everyone, and welcome back to season 2 of Above the Tree Line. My name is Lauren Thurston, and I'm so glad that you guys are joining us today for this, what I think will be an amazing conversation with a fellow ACFer named Mr. John Dorling. Thank you for joining us, John. Give us a little taste of your amazing accent.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Very honored, actually, to be asked to come and do this today.
Well, every time I've talked to you over the years, I've been so fascinated with you reference having lived all over the world, experienced all these different world religions. And I'm just like, what? Like, I want to dig into that a little bit because I feel like you have lived and experienced so many things that me and a lot of Americans will never experience, especially if we spend our entire life kind of in the same state or same country. So tell me kind of briefly, where did you spend most of your time growing up as a kid?
I mean, most of the time, measured by years, would have been England. I was born in England. It was when I was 7, 8. My parents moved to Iran for a working contract. And it was, for me at that age, you can imagine, it's very exciting, very exotic, hot country.
So it was exciting to move from England to Iran.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess for any child it would be. It was just a whole different, it was like going on a long vacation. And we were there for a few years, and then we moved to Saudi Arabia. And that was a very different experience as I was getting older. And then from there, because of lack of schooling, I ended up attending boarding school in England, back in England, and then I would travel to my parents at summer times and Christmas. And that was really my childhood, traveling and living in the Middle East.
Wow. Lots of movement, okay.
Yeah, and influential. And and then we returned to the UK. And then I went on with schooling and college, and then went into my career. And I was very fortunate to have a job that literally just took me all over the world at somebody else's expense.
Yeah. Okay, so you're 7, 8 years old when you leave England and you move to Iran, and you're spending kind of your maturing years in Iran and Saudi Arabia. So not Christian countries, predominantly Islamic. Were your parents believers when y'all were living there?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. So how did living in a country where there was like this, I mean, this was a faith and very different culture. Like the women are covering, they have a lesser spot in society than the men. Like, how did that impact you as youth?
I think one of the strongest memories I had when we initially went to Iran, it was led by the Shah. It was essentially a democracy. And during that period we were there, it came to an end and he was disposed. And the Ayatollahs, who were living in exile in France, returned to the country. And I could feel it and see it changing dramatically back to, what I saw as a very controlling religion. And it went from Western look and feel very much to, very strict, regimented, religious nation. And we left based on the advice of the British government.
So you use the word religious. So a lot of people will be like, Lauren, like, what is your religion? And I really dislike referring to Christianity as a religion. To me, it's my faith. It's a relationship. From your experience, how do the people in that part of the world approach their religion? Is it a faith? Is it a relationship? Or is it more of a duty?
That's a good question. I'm sure for many, it's clearly a faith and it's a strong faith. But on the outset, it looks like it's a cultural doctrine. It's governed by very strict rules, which subsequently years later read the Quran. There aren't any rules in the Quran that says women have to cover their head and cover their faces. But, the cultural environment was such that they did. And it's a very strange thing to see as someone from the West, as you're particularly when you're young, and then having to watch your mother cover up when she goes
Oh,
out.
so your mother also had to
Right.
comply, even though
Yes.
she was not part
Yeah.
of the faith.
Yeah, so that's it's a
Interesting.
strange thing. So when you're confronted with that, when you're young and a teenager, you just see it as very authoritarian.
Right.
That's how you see it because you don't have a choice.
So did that affect your view of God in any way?
I mean, I think so because I didn't come to faith until I was 49, and I pretty much consciously stayed away from religion. Because I saw it based upon that experience. I saw it not in the Christian faith, but I wasn't interested in the Christian faith. I saw it as a very controlling way of life.
You mean the Islamic faith or the Christian faith or both?
No, well, I took through experience the Islamic faith, and I assumed, well,
You
all
projected
faiths are going to be like that.
So your roots are in England, where it's Anglicanism or the Church of England?
Yes, yeah, Church of England. Yeah.
And so did you have any exposure to that prior?
Only through school.
Okay.
Every Sunday at school, and only through the typical family things, weddings, funerals, christenings, that experience. But even then, I used to look at it and think, well, in the context of the Anglican Church, it's all uniforms. There's a distance between the leaders of the church and the congregation, and that was not for me. Although I was attending for family reasons, it was like, no, I don't get this until many years later.
So when did you come to America?
We moved here in 2017.
Oh, so
to live here permanently.
Okay.
Yes, but I've been coming to America on business since 1987.
Okay.
So
I'm just curious, as someone who's a world traveler, lived all over the world, what was your perception of America?
I have to be careful here. Well, to give some context, I, as a young boy, always felt I was born in the wrong country. My passion was cowboys and Indian films.
Oh.
As I got older, was motorcycles, Harley Davidsons, and I used to view America through the lens of the TV.
So pop culture.
And I'm like, I want to go there. And it took until 1987 until I came here for the first time. But I've instantly fell in love with the country. I've always felt I belong here. I've traveled 33 of the 50 states. But my career focused me on the technology industries on the Pacific and on the eastern seaboards. And I really felt I knew America. I really felt I knew America from a cultural standpoint. So when we were coming to live here, I was like, it's not going to be a problem. But there's a whole different part of America here in the South, and there's a whole different part in the middle states in the North, culturally. And I just fallen in love with it. It's like I felt I should have been here always. So, it's not, people were saying to us when we were coming here, 2017, it's going to be tough. You'll be back. You won't last long there. And no, we feel completely at home here, completely, which has a lot to do with the church, I have to say.
Yeah. So now I'm curious about this. Like, you've had this exposure to religions in other parts of the world. America founded kind of on Christian principles. I would say, I think only 30% maybe of Americans attend church monthly, but it does seem to kind of be the predominant religion in America. So when you came here and you were exposed to Christianity with your prior exposure to religion, how did that marry up with your what you believe religion to be?
Well, some context. We'd already become Christians before we moved to America.
Okay.
But
in England.
In England.
Okay.
In a tiny church, in a small village, and that's how we'd come to faith and started attending that church. And our pastor there told us, well, you're moving to America. The first thing you have to do, you know what it is, find a church. The second thing you have to do is find a small group, because we didn't know anybody. So we came here and thought, right, objective one, we have to find a church. We live in River Place. So 101 was ACF.
Right.
And so initially we tried out Austin Baptist Church because we came from a Baptist church.
Oh, you were in a Baptist church in England.
But it was a completely different kind of Baptist church.
Not Southern Baptist.
No, I don't. When I reflect now, having lived in America, and I understand Baptist churches. I'm not sure why the church in England was called a Baptist church. I mean, it did a lot of baptisms.
Was it more like what we would call like a Bible church?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was centered in the Bible. It was centered in the life of Jesus. And,
Okay.
you know, we loved it. And it was our home church where I got baptized in that church.
Do y'all have as many denominations in England as we have here? I mean, we have Presbyterian, we have
yes.
Methodist. You have all of those over there. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, that, again, you know, that's when you think about it, when I was coming to faith was very confusing.
Very confusing.
Yeah.
So then you came to faith while y'all were in England. Well, how did that transpire? How did you go from feeling like you did about religion to suddenly being a believer?
Well, I think, you know, I was 49 and my wife and I, we always have this tradition between the gap of Christmas and New Year. We start to plan, what's the big thing we're going to do next year? What is the big thing, both in business, both in life? What was it? And then this one year we said, why don't we go and investigate faith and religion?
That was going to be your thing.
That was going to be our
So
big
it wasn't
thing.
for a particular faith, just
No,
across the board. Okay.
Why don't we go and do that? Because we felt we were ignorant of it, biased of it, you know, very judgmental of it. And we felt, no, let's go and study it. Let's go find the evidence. Let's see what it represents. And we spent about 3 months doing that, 3-4 months, and studied many YouTube videos, many YouTube sermons, many YouTube lectures, many YouTube debates.
Predominantly for
between non-believers and
Christianity?
believers. Yeah, we kind of ran the whole gambit in the first 6 months. You know, we looked at Islam, we looked at Christianity, Judaism.
Did you ever did you ever feel like you leaned, like for one reason or another, towards one faith over another? Or were you really out there just trying to be educated?
Well, naturally, yes. You know, born and raised in the UK. You know, there is the Church of England. In schools in the UK, there is faith education. In schools in the UK, when I went to school, every morning of every school day started with a Christian service, 1 or 2 hymns and something from the Bible. So, yes, and if people ask me, you know, what religion are you? I'd say, oh, I'm Church of England, because I was told to say that by my parents. You know, sometimes on forms, government forms, if they ask a question, you know, what religion are you? I'm Church of England. C of E, that's what we used to write on the form.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. As opposed to just saying I'm Christian. I'm Church of England
it's just
specifically.
Church of England. Yeah, so, you know, because the sovereign of the country is the head, is the head of that church. So King Charles now III is the head of that church. So, yeah.
So y'all went out and you just started exploring, trying to learn everything you could. And then did you feel like you were kind of gravitating like towards like, okay, I don't know, this is just my perspective. I'm like, one of these faiths has got to be right. They can't all be right.
Correct. Yeah.
One of them has got to be right.
Yeah.
So did you feel like you started, suddenly I'm talking to you and I realize how much I say y'all, because I'm like, you're not saying that and I'm saying it a lot, but I'm a Texan. But did y'all feel like you were leaning towards?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I particularly enjoyed watching Christians of great faith debating
like atheists?
Atheists and agnostics, and just fascinating to hear the arguments to and for. And that really just captured my imagination. And I started to think, wow, if this person, a very prominent people in the UK, really believes that, many of them were scientists, but they were Christians. Professor John Lennox was one of my favorite. He was head of math faculty at Oxford University. Wow. You know, a scientist all his life, but a very strong believer in Christianity. And watching him debate atheists was a joy. You know, and the way they did it, of course, it was very polite and very considered.
Respectful.
Yeah,
Okay,
course.
I was about to say, hopefully it was
not like our
respectful.
politicians, no.
Yeah.
So, that warmed my heart, essentially. And then it was my wife, about 4 months into that, she said, shall we go to church? I was like, oh, I don't know whether I'm ready for that. But anyway, that's a long story. We did, and here we are 11 years later, very strong followers of Christ, and have a life now that we didn't have. And in the context of travel, when I think about all my years of traveling the world, I used to be like most travelers, you know, I was very I felt I was very streetwise, but I was always very cautious and essentially wouldn't trust anybody. And my faith helped me immensely to learn to trust people and learn that 99.99% of the people on the planet are not out to hurt you. They're not out to steal from you. They're just out to get to know you. And that changed my worldview, becoming a Christian, and changed my attitude to meeting and engaging with strangers, something I would never do around the world. You know, I just think, what do you want? What are you going to do to me? You know, because I travel a lot on business on my own. And that changed it, and it made it far more enjoyable once I become a Christian, to engage with other cultures and have discussions with them and tell people, you know, that I'm a Christian, which I'd never done before. And that's the one thing we truly love about coming to America, and especially coming to Texas, is that it's a cultural norm to be able to talk about your faith.
Yes.
You know, it's almost, well, where do you live, where do you work, and where do you go
what
to church,
yes.
right? Whereas in the UK, still the culture, even amongst Christians, is, you know, you don't discuss faith and politics in polite company. It's what your parents tell you when you're growing up. It's the best advice they give you. Don't discuss it. Whereas here, certainly in Texas, and I've traveled, as I say, all over America, you without any sort of ridicule or shame, you can openly discuss that you're a Christian, you're a faith, I go to this church, and it's just acceptable. And that's just, to us, a joy.
You know, it's funny because even as an American, like if I think there's been jokes about this, but when you go, if I travel over to Spain or to England or Germany, and somebody says, "Oh, like where are you from?" I don't say America. I say Texas.
Right.
And that's kind of a unique thing, I
Yes.
feel like, for Texans. A lot of other states would say, "Oh, I'm American."
Yes.
But even as an American, like we've talked about when I'm traveling to like the northeast part of the United States, I'm like, there's a part of me that's like, I feel like that group is not super friendly. Like, am I going to be okay there? So there's still some trepidation, even within my own country, because the country is so different.
Yes.
But there was one of the things that I know we had talked about at church one Sunday. We had some missionaries that we sent from ACF over to London. And this was many years ago, but London was not known for being a widely Christian churched city. And they were somewhat under the radar, but they, like, when I would talk to them, they would be like, yeah, you know, a lot of our churches have been turned into, like, you know, they're empty buildings. So they're being used for bars or apartment complexes, which was mind blowing to me, because this was such a huge part of like the Christian evolution, like of the faith. So we saw church attendance basically in Western Europe just almost flatline. But there's a new study out now that's called the Quiet Revival, and we're seeing a resurgence of the Christian faith in England and Wales specifically. Like, what do you think has brought that about? It's being led by Gen Z, predominantly in Catholicism and Pentecostalism, which is interesting because they're so different.
Yeah.
What's happening in England that's bringing this change about?
I mean, my thoughts on it, I think young people, and I have an 18-year-old daughter, I think, they've grown up in this world of social media and technology, and I think they reach a point in their maturity where they recognize it, whatever it is that it was doing for them is not doing it. And they're seeking some form of truth. And then a lot of, churches that are trying to attract the younger generation, they'll be very informal, they'll be very inviting, they'll have great worship service. They're giving young people an experience that their parents didn't have. Typically, and including the church that we went to and were baptized in England, it's just one piano and someone leading, singing of hymns. It's pretty, that's all we knew and we loved it, but, it's not like here at ACF. And I see young people in the UK that are going to these contemporary churches, and I think it's fantastic. I think they're seeking truth. I think they're done with a lot of the social media. They're done with, politicians that they see and interpret as just lying all the time, no matter what color you are. And I think they're looking for something. They're seeking, and I think it's fantastic.
In your time in England, why was there such a sharp decline in the church? Like, what What happened where like the church used to be like it was almost like a staple and then in like the 1900s and the 2000s it just kind of plummeted. Like what brought that about?
I think because the church didn't move in terms of the church culture with the culture of the nation. I don't know where there is a church in the United Kingdom like ACF. Like, I don't know of a church in the United Kingdom that has, drum kits, pianos, guitars. I don't know that, and I think people, generations. I'm a boomer, but Gen X's, they saw it as very old-fashioned, not moving with the times, and it just, popular culture took over. And it was happening pre-internet, so we can't blame the internet for it. But it was just happening. It wasn't cool to go to church. That was something like your parents and your grandparents did. But I'm not doing that. That was kind of the reaction. And most of the churches, sadly, the traditional churches, like the Anglican Church and Roman Catholic churches, they're not ever they're never full. They're half empty or more on a Sunday.
Right.
So I think it's the church that's got to change in its leadership and its message to attract new people to come.
Bill, it seems like that's happening. It's not something that you hear about on the news, but we see like Bible sales right now are up worldwide, like I think 22%. Gen Z has this, like they have quadrupled their attendance in England and Wales in the Christian church. And so we are seeing this kind of resurgence. It really is a quiet revival because you kind of have to go looking for it.
Right.
It's not something a lot of people are talking about. But it's exciting to see that happening right there on your home turf. I mean, and if the trend continues this way, like the country could look totally different in another 10 years.
Right. And it needs to. I think, like a lot of Western countries, there's a real risk it loses its moral compass and forgets what it represents, what it stands for. And if you look at all the great nations, they're founded in faith, founded in religion. If you look at history and you start to lose that, you're losing the glue that ultimately bound that country together.
Right.
I always think it's interesting, one of the things in all my travels is currency, and I've only come across one currency on the planet that says on it, "In God we trust."
Wow.
There's no other currency that I've seen that has that. And I've always thought that was really interesting in all my travels back in the day when you had to have hard currency to travel anywhere. I'd spend time looking at it, and always, of course, in America on the coins and on the bills, it said, "In God we trust." And I used to tell people, well, that tells you something about America. If you don't know anything else, look at their currency.
Interesting.
Yeah, I used to think that was really, really just an interesting thing.
Yeah, I never actually thought about it because I grew up with that.
Yeah. I haven't come across another currency. I could be wrong, right? But I haven't found one yet other than the dollar.
Yeah. So final question for you. What would you say to people who are where you were as a 49-year-old, having been exposed? I mean, the information, there's vast information about everything. It's readily available. Somebody's looking for truth. What do you say to them?
For me personally, I had a great job, had a great family, had a great home, great life. Materially and externally, people would look at that and go, "Oh, these people have got it all sorted out." But we always felt there was something missing. We were never truly satisfied, no matter what vacation you went on, what car you got, what restaurant you ate in. There was always like something missing, and we just went in search. Like I said, we thought, let's go and explore faith, religion, and see if it's for us. And as a consequence, so when I went searching, I was more interested in arguments against the faith than for it. And as a consequence of that, it's the reverse psychology. The first book I ever read was The Case for Christ. because I
Yeah.
knew the story of it. I knew that
Lee
this,
Strobel wanted
this
to disprove.
journalist
Yeah.
was not a believer, became a believer. That fascinated me. I thought, well, I'm going to read that.
Well, same thing for C.S. Lewis.
So
Brilliant man.
the advice I was given, and I would give to anybody, that if you're exploring it, my advice would be to study the resurrection very deeply. Just study that one event in history, the resurrection, and just do that in its entirety. Obviously the Bible, but other publications that you can study, historical documents that you can study, testimonies from people that you can study. Just do that completely. I spent probably 3 to 4 months studying the resurrection, and I was advised to do that because if you land on the result that it's true, then everything else after that is simple to accept. And I did. I remember that day that I just reflected, looked at it, and thought personally, it's true. I'm going to take that leap of faith. The evidence suggests it's true, and it's true. And that was it. Then, turning water into wine is not a problem.
Right. All the rest of it.
Which is what a lot of people who are non-believers get hung up on.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say to anybody is start with the resurrection of Christ.
That's awesome. Well, John, thank you so much.
Welcome.
You have had a fascinating life. You have an amazing testimony. I love your accent. I love hearing you talk. And I love you're the first person really on the show that has given us a perspective outside of American Christianity. So I appreciate that. And
Most welcome.
I've loved all the information. So thank you guys so much for joining us. If you have any additional questions, feel free to send them in at www.acfellowship.org/podcast. We need your questions to get this podcast continuing to go every week. So please send us your content, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys on an episode next week.